We're going to do lofting today, and we were last week we were looking at kind of the build-up of complex shapes, and lofting is one of those things of how you transition from one place to another in a sketch. The phrase lofting actually comes from the boat building industry and has been transferred into aeronautics as well. And if you think of a wooden boat, let's say a rowing boat, and you think of it as its skeletal format, all of those skeletal formats are in the planes that we were talking about last week. And the loft is that sweep that's happening underneath it. So that's what designers use a lot as a trick just to come up with form. So what we'll do today, just to start off with, is first of all, I'm going to look at notation, and then we'll jump straight into lofting. So in your house style of sketching books, I'll just find this here, chapter 4, you have a whole section on notation. The way designers sketch and write is a little bit different in that we all have our own handwriting, and we're taught from an early age how to do joined up writing. Uh, and over the years, then what happens is some people are very precise and will spend time making sure that their handwriting is perfect. But the vast majority of us, our handwriting will deteriorate over the years to a point when you get to Leaving Cert, your handwriting is legible by yourself because that's all it's aimed to do. You're trying to learn stuff as quick as you can. But it can be tough to read handwriting and script. So what we do in design is we to using uppercase fonts and fonts that are preferably sans serif. And what I mean by sans serif is at the bottom of your letters, there's no little hooks or loops. They're known as serifs. So look, we standard fonts, Arial, Calibri are good. So they're good benchmarks to look over. In order to practice your sketching. But also what I've got down is your sizes that are relevant and getting to sketch in the right way. The other one, and I'm sure PJ has gone through with this, is with the house style of sketching, we have a standard title block in relation to contents. And what we have is the date, page number, the phase of the project title, and the your name. And that doesn't change throughout the project. So what it does is it helps you keep chronological order of your sheets, but it also lets other people know when and how work has been done. So what we're going to do today is start off on that very simple stuff with handwriting and then move on. So I'm just going to jump to another sheet. Now, I'm conscious I can pick up my pencils and just write in a certain fashion. So in the case of here, you have lofting. Now, some people are going to find this difficult, and that's why we have the stenotypes on your equipment list. That if you're struggling with it, use the stencils. It's the way the majority of us learned how to do this type of writing because we had to do that with our tech. That's virtually gone now because of SolidWorks and digital platforms. But it's still a good exercise every evening just to practice your alphabets. I know it sounds ridiculous, but it's it. Little trick that you could use: get a spare sheet, and this could be a cartridge sheet. Um, but the idea is that you can line out a sheet so that you make sure that your text is horizontal at all times. What you want is text that's falling off to a side. So if we're kind of looking at the house style of sketching and what's relevant for the title block, so the date. So today's date is the 3rd of the 11th, and again, it's up to yourself the format that you want to do with this. So put my date in. The next stage is sheet number. So again, in this case, we're just going to go number 1. Phase of project, and I'm going to the for this type of project, you probably only need the title of your project because it's a small project. Once you get into bigger projects, the phases start changing, like concept development or into design for manufacturing, assembly, and so on. So in this case, I'm going to put in lofting and morphing. Um, and then obviously you have your name. Okay, now what I've just done here is I've worked from the right out, and that means that I'm not trying to cram stuff in. And over time, you'll get an idea of how much space you're going to need for this. So that's done. Leave it as. You can take your trace sheet out. Now, one trick that we used to use uh, back in the day was we would have a sheet of lined paper that when we're doing our notation on a page, we could just slip it in underneath when we're doing our writing. But that's something that over time you'll develop and you'll get little bit of practice on. So that's your fonts and your notation. So I would urge you to print off um, the alphabet of Arial or Calibri and blow it up, use it as a template, and just go back to practicing that uppercase and try and get away from this joined up writing. Unless your handwriting is absolutely sensational, nobody's going to understand it. And the reason we use notation is both for notes to ourselves, but also to communicate. So that's it. The other downside of doing this type of text is that you'll end up writing everybody's Christmas cards the rest of your life. So good luck with that anyway. So lofting. Now, what we did last week was worked with planes and axes, and today is no different. So what we're going to do is just draw down a couple of shapes just to explain it. A couple of horizontal lines, and I'm going to put a center line down through this. And again, I want you to draw along with me. It will just help kind of get your head into. Now, that's a center line, and there are two planes looking in at them at the side. We're doing an elevation drawing, and elevation drawings are great to begin to understand what we're doing. So what PJ is going to give you tomorrow are exercises where you transition from, let's say, a circle to a bigger circle. Okay, and I'm working with that principle. So in the case of today, we're going to show you how to do that. So a small circle at the top, there and there, to a bigger circle at the bottom. And what you're trying to do is line up your distances between there and there should be the same, and there should be the same, because this is your center line. Okay. Now, in elevation, it's very easy to do a loft because you just have to join up the dots. And that's going to be very useful when you're getting into more complex shapes, because what it means is if I'm transforming from, let's say, a square base to a triangular bottom, with 4 points at the bottom and 3 points at the top, that makes it tougher. So what we'll do is work through those point systems. Now, that's an easy loft. And if we were to do that in 3 dimensions, again, the principles are still the same. I can go over this. So our ellipse goes in here, so practice it. And we know that further we go down away from the horizon line, change, that means our ellipse changes up. Okay, so what you have now is a transition from a small circle to a big circle. And that might seem very basic, and it might seem like something that you kind of looking at, kind of going, well, there's no real product that looks like that. And yeah, there is, because that's just a basic geometric form. Now, let's have a play with this. I'm just going to move the sheet to the side. What I want you to notice as well, I didn't start my sheet up in the top left corner. It's just something I never do, because if you start in the top left corner, what you're forcing yourself into is a linear form of thinking. You're going to go, I need to get from here across to here, and then I'm going to come down and I'm going to go across here, and then if I have any space, I'm going to start here and go across. And what that means is it's a linear form of thinking, and design isn't like that. We know the way our heads work, stuff pops in randomly, and designers need to be able to take advantage of that. So I always start off arbitrarily somewhere, anywhere on the sheet, and I start then working around it depending on how my thought process is working. So in the case of this, we're going to go back to a couple of what we refer to as thumbnails. So again, our center points, our end planes, and again, we're going to have a small piece and a larger piece. Okay, so again, they should be the same. Now, somebody has their mic on. Can you turn it off there, please? Um, so now, what we did in the last time, we did a basic transition straight from top to bottom. Now, if you think about all the different ways you can do that, this time I'm going to do a curve and I'm going to match that. Okay, sorry, that one's a bit out. So that's a loft as well. Okay, it's not going in a straight line this time, it's going in an outwards curve. Okay, again, another thumbnail. And again, making sure to use. You don't have to do it at the exact same size. They can be smaller. They can start going behind it. So again, starting small, uh, going to large, and this will be behind there a little bit. This time, I'm going to curve in. Similar for this one. Again, I come up with a different form of these. Now, what we can do is explore those. So do you remember last week we had this notion of why do we sketch? We sketch firstly to understand, and the second one is to explore. Now, what I'll be encouraging you to do, and what PJ will be encouraging you to do over the next couple of classes, is to begin to explore this these forms. I always have this phrase of ask yourself, what if? What if it did this? What if it did that? Like as a designer, you should have an inquisitive nature, and you should be interested to find out, well, if I did that, that it was a really bold curve. So again, let's just do it. Um, Small at the top, large at the bottom. And this time I'm just going to do an outward curve. I'm going to switch the page just to make it a little bit easier for me. So again, what you have are now based on the same start point. We now have four completely different forms. Now, what we'll do is show you a couple of these in the three dimensions. Now, I'm starting with ellipses because ellipses are very easy to put into uh, perspective, because once they're horizontal at all, you just work with horizontal and vertical major and minor axis. So I can switch all these drawings straight away into um, uh, three dimensions. And again, this is great practice for your ellipses. Okay. Remember, at the bottom, they just get that little bit bigger. Now, what we now have are 4 three-dimensional shapes. Now, I should not yet focusing on this. This is just another little trick. PJ always talks about filling the page. Look what's happened here. I've drawn this one and it's gone in behind it. I haven't continued to draw it. I've just left it. So now all of a sudden this starts looking like they're part of the same drawing, that one is sitting behind the other. And that can be a great little trick to using up all your pages. Now, when we say filling a page, even if we look up here, look at all this space up here. This is good real estate. And again, you can actually get into this habit of going, well, what happens if it goes like that? What happens if it does a swoop? What happens if it's it goes the opposite direction, where it goes from large to small? And again, you're starting to really play with this notion of thumbnails, okay? And center lines, always center lines, large to small. I'm just going to put a curve on it. So all of a sudden, you're starting to see complex shapes really starting to come in here. That's a really weak ellipse. So where do we go from there? That's really handy for coming up with basic shapes. But what happens if I'm transitioning from this shape to this shape to an even bigger? So you're transferring between 3 points. Okay, so let's draw that out. Um, in cross section first. So again, I'm going to use this space up here. Just doing in the center line, a big base, and a medium base here, and a small base here. Now, what you will get into the habit when you're doing these elevation drawings is not bothering even drawing the second side of it. This is an axis. Just write that in there. So everything rotates around this. So if you just do an elevation view of a segment of it, then you can know what's going to happen. It's going to sweep around it. So in this case, this is going to come down to that one. It's going to go out to this one, and it's going to go out to this one. So you end up with that kind of a shape. So let's look at that now in our 3 dimensions. Okay, center lines in. And again, this is where you're really going to get this notion of um, um, uh, line weight. Okay, because you're going to have lots of construction lines and lots of center lines. And I'll just put that one in there. So we're going to start with a small one because we're working in 3 dimensions now. I need that because I want to make sure my ellipse is balanced. We're going to go to a slightly bigger one to there, and we're going to go to a big one down here. So again, if you're unsure of those measurements, look, you can just put a pen down and kind of get a rough measurement across to see if you're right. So you kind of go, oh, it's a bit big, so we put that back in. So it's just little tricks you can do to measure those out. Again, forget about these lines now. A lot of people will actually start here now and start throwing these lines down along it. But the reality is, get those ellipses in first. Remember, your angle is changing as you're going down. So that's a bad one. So I'm on the edge of the table here. So now what we have are 3 ellipses. Now how they transition into one another, you can play around it. Okay, so I'm just looking at this drawing. I'm ever so slightly too far over to the right. So it's kind of skewed it a little bit, but we'll leave it at that. Now, what you've gone is you have transitioned along an axis between 3 planes. That's an X-plane, that's an X-plane, and that's an X-plane. We draw that in, that view here. So anything inside that space, that's your Y plane, and then you can't see your X plane because it's straight on you. Okay, so that gives you a good idea. Now you can add to that as you're going on then, because you know you have your center line. And this is the beauty of doing center lines. I can draw that up. Let's say I wanted to put a cap on this. Here's my center line, and now do another ellipse. And I can connect them up. Okay, so now you're into, you might be designing something to do with perfume bottles or so on. You can then start putting labels on. Again, that could be another ellipse. Across a center point. Okay. That'll be a little bit better there. So you start building up your sketch into more complexity. Now, there are other ways you can go about this. Let's say we want to explore again. We want to go from a large circle, oh sorry, a small circle into a large circle into another small one. Again, I'm going to just throw this behind. Center points, widths, make sure they're as accurate as you can get them. We're going behind this drawing. We're going to put this one in line with the same one at the top. So what happens? We can go directly. Let's try this just different. Let's get our ellipses in first. All right, follow my own advice. Again, it's going behind there. Now I might just do that very lightly, but give an impression maybe that that's glass. And again, the bottom one. Again, you're getting into that double conical shape. Okay, and again, just paying attention that this one now is going behind it. And if you wanted a silhouette to stand them out, that can be fairly handy to do as well. Again, look at the amount of space that I'm really beginning to use on this sheet. There is there's no area on the sheet that you cannot draw something on. Again, what am I exploring here? Maybe just put a little note for yourself. I'm looking at what's known as lofting paths. Okay, now what a good sketch book should do, or good sketch sheet, is it should show you a line of thought. So leading from here, this is now the line of thought. It's not our segmented approach. So in other words, if I was to draw lines around this, we're going from there over to here, up into here. We're going down into here. We're flipping over to here, and then we're coming back to there. At this point, we made a decision to actually, do you know what? Let's explore a little bit up here as well. Okay, so looking at kind of the elevations. So these elevations are a great way to explore form very, very quickly till you kind of go, actually, do you know what? There's something really interesting happening here. Let's try it now. Let's put it into 3 dimensions, see what it's doing. Now, the other thing that's really important is if I draw another, I'll use this space down the bottom corner here, this elevation or these center lines again. And I'm going to do a couple of them. Okay. Let's say that's the top of our product and that's the bottom, similar for here and here. by changing the position of the second thing, changes out our uh, shapes. So let's look at this. In the case of something like this, and I'm going to do this in 3 dimensions. So again, throw your ellipses on that. This is sometimes why I wish I had a drawing table at home. I'm hanging off the edge of a table here trying to draw these and keep it on camera. Okay, so our 3 shapes, and I'm going to just do these as a connect, straight connect. Now, if you look at that shape, you can imagine a product like, I don't know, a cocktail shaker, um, something like that. Again, and that's all that's done is taken that shape here, which doesn't look anything like a cocktail shaker, and brought it down to here. I've just moved up that center point and it's given me a very different transition. Similarly, if I lower it down and I do the same small top, large middle, and again, mirror the top, and I do my ellipses on them. Now, you get into really interesting territory here because now one is starting to go in behind the other, because you already see that kind of saucer effect beginning to happen here. And again, I'm just going to use the straight transition. And this time, it's in behind it, so you don't see it. Now, if you're confused about that, what is always handy to do is just draw a little thumbnail beside it. And say, that one is this. And just maybe a little note to yourself. Maybe do it in a decrease the viewing angle. What that means is that I'm saying, just making a little note to myself saying, if I'm drawing this one again in 3 dimensions, I want to just twist it around slightly so that I can see more of this base and give it a more realistic form that I can begin to understand it. Okay, so as you can see now, I'm what now, about half an hour drawing and explaining out this, but you can see what we're doing is really filling the sheet, and I still have more than half the sheet left to do. This is what we mean about filling sheets. These things are expensive. They're not, you don't just throw them away, but it always baffles me every year that students just do one drawing here, one drawing here, one drawing here, down and down. So PJ is going to give you an exercise and there's going to be logical step through it. And I know some of you already that you're going to look at that and go, what has he asked me to do? And I'm going to just jump through it and do it. And you'll end up with 6, 7, or 8 different shapes. Or drawings. And in truth, that is what I refer to as drawing pictures because you have to, but you're not exploring. And I think it's really important to get into this habit of really playing around with your drawing. Now, that's cylinders. You can play just a little trick with cylinders as well. I'm going to just uh, put in my center line. And this one is very much about drawing in using your axes. Again, I'm going to use this approach down here where I've just brought this center line down. But this time what I'm going to do is make the top bit. And I'm just going to bring that down. Nice and light construction lines. Okay. I'm just going to bring that one in a little bit. And I'm going to draw your ellipse around that. And I'm going to do my ellipse around this one as well. Okay, and the bottom one, I'm going to do slightly smaller. Again. And what we have here is what we would refer to a very standard mug shape. Let's just draw those in. I'm going to curve these bases so it's not a straight transition. You're now into a curve leading into a straight transition. So you have what is a basic mug shape again, because that's a little bit pointy there and there. Because you have a thickness, you now can draw in your thickness of that particular mug. Again, if you're doing this now, how do we put that into 3 dimensions? And again, we can take this. Imagine your vanishing point back here, because we can take a line out and bring that down. Take a line out, and that's coming back through our dimensions. We can imagine our vanishing point over here. That's another point, and I'm going to actually I'm going to bring it out a little bit further just to emphasize the point to there, and I'm going to drop that down. This time I'm going to do it like a mug handle where it just curves in. So that's again what we've done is we're drawing in a plane. I'm drawing the center of the handle rather than trying to get to the overall shape. Again, now I can get my widths. So again, what I'm going to do is transition, do another loft between here so that it's a there. Now that can follow straight down and follow around. We can bring the second handle down. This will disappear in behind, and the center point. I can put a curve there. Again, now you can put your widths on it, or your thicknesses, sorry. And again, you're into showing how you can get very complex shapes very quickly. Again, I would just, for line consistency, get the outside of this done so that it stands out. And again, what we'll be doing next week is basically looking at light and shade and how we can really begin to look at differentiating this as a 3-dimensional form. But believe me, get the sketch right first before you go anywhere near doing light and shade, because even the best light and shade will get absolutely messed up if you haven't got a good sketch to work with. Now, that's ellipses. And again, I want you to really look at how much space I've used up. Again, I'm just going to write in mug in here, just to kind of give an idea that I'm not just thinking of them now as shapes, I'm starting to think of them as products. Now, what else we want to do now is look at something like if we are transitioning from a square to a bigger square, how does that work? Okay, so it's not as simple now as our ellipses, where I draw a center line down and I can draw my ellipse. So what we have to think about is our planes. So this is very much axis, drawing from an axis. Now we're going to start drawing from planes. So again, draw our center line. This time what we're going to do is that's going to be the top of it. That's going to be the bottom of it. And again, use your vanishing points. And this time I'm going to do vanishing points that are very much converging way off my page. But instead of leaving them at that point, you're going to extend them on. So what you've done is you've drawn a plane fully across, and that's your center point. Do the same now to this vanishing point. And again, for the base. And again, imagine your vanishing point way off, the converging points way off the other side of your page. So now what we have are two planes intersecting. Um, this one will be our y plane, and this one is our x plane. Now we can start looking at our cube. So what are we transitioning from? We're transitioning from, let's say, a large at the top to a small at the bottom. So let's do our cube. Now I would always start at the closer end, because remember when we were doing 2-point perspective, the foreshortening is really important. So the distance from there to there will be different from there to there, and draw them back to your ellipse again, or sorry, draw them back to your vanishing points. And again, we want a width. So if that's our width here, a lot of people use that plane to get the width. Again, do your foreshortening. If your perspective is done in uh, fairly in your face, sometimes it's better to judge it from the top line rather than the middle. Okay, now that's my top. We now have our top square in perspective. Now we do our bottom one. This time it's going to be smaller. So we're going to go to there, and slight foreshortening on it is there. And again, bring those back through your vanishing points. And again, I'm going to get the width there, and roughly a little bit of foreshortening back, and I bring those in. Now what we have are two squares now built around the center point and on our planes. So let's connect them up. Let's just do a straightforward line connect. That one goes to there. That one goes to there. That one is a straight down. And I just do the edges now a little bit clearer. And the inside lines you don't have to have as heavy. But again, now what you've got is that transition from large into small. And again, the principles of what I've done over here, we can play around with. So in other words, it will look the exact same as these because it's in an elevation. The principle is still the same. That in elevation could be this, or have we got one done over here? This one down here, I'm just going to draw a line, very light line going across to there. The base of this one is the exact same profile in elevation, but then depending on how you treat it in 3 dimensions will determine the shape. Okay. Other things that you can play around with is these. You can go back up to here and really begin to see, okay, I can learn from these. So instead of drawing these all out again, I can now go, well, I'm going to do the cube like that. I'm going to do the cube with this type of transition and so on. Now, other things that you'll see is the size that I've drawn this. It's good and big. So you know that there are elements on this that are important to be reading, and there are other ones where are just exploring or investigating. Okay, so this one is, I'm going to write on this one, planes. Now, these are plan views, and this is an elevation. Now, can you imagine we take now a cube, and we're going to do two cubes that are the same, and we're going to do the transition between them. Now, what you'll end up with is just a rectilinear form, unless you start putting your lofting path is a little bit different. However, what happens if I do that? But this time, I'll just draw a center line in here again. And a center line going across. This time, I'm going to transition to that shape. Where does that leave me? Okay, so again, let's work on our planes. So similar to what we just did here, I'm going to do this on just behind here. So center line in. I'm going to do a plane. One there. Another plane coming across. Now, do you see I'm starting to really go over my last drawing, but I'm trying not to draw too much over it, and I'm trying to really tone down my construction lines. That will make it much easier for you to see the picture at the end. Otherwise, if your construction lines are way too heavy, this page becomes fairly messy and very hard to read. So again, I'm going to start here, go to about there. I'm going to start there, and I'm going to just shorten it to about there. Okay, so again, bring those back through your vanishing points. Okay, now we go down here to this plane. This time we've twisted, so it's very easy for me to draw a cube here, but now we can see our width is the same, so we can bring that down, straight down. We can bring this one down. We can bring this one down. So what we're doing is we're giving ourselves our points on our next face. So what we have now is our lines going from there to there, to there, to there, back. I'm just going to do that one in lightly. And that one's slightly off. That should realistically be it. Now, what happens on this time? This time, what we have is to match up the points. So if we kind of go that that point here is going to connect to that point will connect to that point, this point will connect to this point, and this point will get to this point. So let's look at that. This point goes to here. So I'm just going to draw a straight line between them. Very lightly. This point should now go to here. This point should go to here. And this point should go to out here. Again, I'm going to draw it in behind. Now, see what we have now? We have a product with a twist in it. And I'm going to draw on that line because it is okay, and again, look at the way I'm disappearing it in behind. So that's a very good example of how you can take a product and just twist it and gives you opportunities with it. Again, if I was doing this again, I'd foreshorten this a lot, have a lot more and make it stubbier. So again, how do I do that? I just kind of say, well, that was my initial transition that I did for this product, which came in like that, came in like that. That one came down to the bottom, and that one came down to there. So that's that product in elevation. If I was doing that again, I'd make it stubbier just to see. So center line in, edge, 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 and edge. Just to try and see what that transition is going to be like in a less elongated way. Okay, so that kind of sums up what lofting is about. Now, I'm going to kind of go full circle now with this based on the stuff that we did last week. And if you think about it, we're using planes here. And what I'm transitioning between or lofting between are two Z planes. What happens if you transfer between different planes? So in other words, I'm going to draw a line in, vertical line in here. And I'm actually going to draw over this product. Okay, so that's one plane. Now, it's always a good idea to try and not draw off the end of a sheet. So I'm deliberately making sure that I'm not going to have any product just edging off the edge of a sheet. And again, what do we need? Our center lines. Because if you haven't got your center lines, these lofts can be very, very difficult to do. And I'll explain out why now. Now, if you imagine, this time I'm going to have a shape here. I'm just going to swing that around. Actually, you know what? I'm going to put it in behind. Swing that nice and lightly and down there. So this shape has gone in behind this one. And now that's on our X plane. Now we're going to do something on our Z plane. This one's going to come to more of a point. Now, instead of what is happening up here, which is a vertical transition, this time you're transitioning through 90 degrees. Again, this is where you can get into lots of complexity. And when you go back to look at your computer mice and so on, this is kind of the trick that you're using. So now our loft, instead of being, I could go a straight line with this, or I could decide that my loft is going to be a curve like this. Okay. Now, if you look at that basic shape, now I'm not putting this one in heavy because it's not going to be the edge of the product. I can see that that edge here is just popping out beyond that center plane. So that means there's more product over here. So how do we find that other product? Well, again, there's more loft lines that'll come around and so on. But also, let's say I want to find what's going on at this point. I drop it down to our center line. So I make it a little bit straighter than that. And again, follow our perspective, bring it across. That means now we have three more points. We have this point, and this point. And there's another transition happening between those. Okay. Okay, now again, look, we've gone out beyond. So again, there's another one down here. So I'm going to just keep going with this. And this should start looking familiar based on the stuff that we did in workshop last week, where we were making skeletal models of complex shapes. So again, 3 points here, here, and here. And I'm going to transition between them. And what you're doing is you're just playing with lofting. Okay. Now, when it comes to drawing the outer shape, then it's like what we did with the mouse last week, where you now are doing almost a tangent to all of those, and you end up with your shape. Now, that shape there, you can imagine being the start of, let's say, an iron. We'll do a handle. Okay, so again, these complex shapes, that's your center point now, so I can do an elliptical view here, which gives me an idea of maybe a button or something on it. So again, you're straight into complex shapes very, very quickly from around here. So I'm just going to sum up what I've talked about today. One is notation. Notation is really, really important. Not only to communicate with other people, but also to communicate your thought processes, like down here, like over here, of what we were thinking at any particular time. So again, practice that fonts and have a look at ones that are suitable. Again, as I say, sans serif. Um, the next thing that we talked about was lofting through axis and lofting through planes. And again, all the exercises that you're going to get tomorrow will force you to do that. The last thing that we did said that I'd look at today was this filling of a sheet. Now there's a sheet and I'm looking at that kind of going, I still have space here. I still have some space here and I still have some space here. Use it. Okay, this now starts looking like a vibrant sheet of sketching that's communicating with people.